Man, you guys sound so good. Next week is Henry's last Sunday before he goes back to school. Oh, thanks. I'm Peter and Henry. I got to tell you, I love hearing you guys sing together. It just warms my heart. So thank you. I talked a few weeks ago about worshiping, and you guys are great musicians, and I love that. And we're so fortunate to have Doug here when he's here, and Joe last week was I shouldn't say this. Sometimes you have somebody say, I can play guitar, and then you hear him and you're like, oh, Joe, you were fantastic, and I was so pleased. Someone asked me, I said, hey, Joe's playing guitar on Sunday, and they said, have you ever heard him play? And I went, oh, no, actually, that could be bad. And it wasn't. You were great, and I loved every second of it. But we are fortunate to have good musicians, but we always are looking for people to help out with that. So if that's something if you're a secret musician, you need to tell me. So anyway, so that's, I'm sorry, I got to get this, my computer's acting up here, I apologize. There we go, now everything's perfect. So a few little announcements I wanted to make. One is, Trish and Chuck are on vacation still, so Trish, the secretary and treasurer, and I miss having her around, man. One of the things that happened is the artwork that she normally does for me is so much better than the artwork that I do for me. So if you're a graphic designer, also, I apologize for the PowerPoint. But one of the things that she's helped me do is create that, and then the reading schedule, that's part of that process, and I realized yesterday afternoon I didn't have the reading schedule. So here's your challenge. The passage, we're talking about the feeding of the 5,000 today. It's in every one of the Gospels. So here's your challenge. Read the account in each one of the Gospels. And then on either end, I'm still wanting us to read Acts 2. So read Acts 2, and then read the account of the feeding of the 5,000. If you forget that, call me during the week, and I'll remind you what you're supposed to be doing. A few little other announcements. We already talked about that. One of the things that will be coming, you see it on the back of your note sheet. There's some announcements. This PEAK survey. Sometime in the next 3 weeks, you will receive an email that is a survey, and we're kind of the guinea pig church. That one of the things of being in a denomination, one of the great things about being in a denomination is the support, and they are helping us in this transition with Pastor Jim leaving and me being here, and it's actually a pretty cool thing. They're going to help us assess what has gone on over the last several years and through our history and where we're at today. And so you'll get some questions. Some of them are super appropriate and applicable to us. Some of them you're going to go, it doesn't even matter, this is not us. Answer them honestly. It's anonymous. Nobody's going to know if you're like that yutz up front. Answer that. They're trying to get 2/3 of the average number of people who come. And I said, we don't even know who goes to our church anymore. That's one thing we may want to assess. Through COVID, a lot of these questions kind of become weird and irrelevant. We have no idea who's watching, or there probably is some way to do that if we were Google, we could know, but we're not. So anyway, when you get that, that's all that is. You don't need to panic. It's not Big Brother or anything, but it's, and just be honest in the assessment, and about good things too. If you're like some things that are going on, say that. Enough about that. I survived my backpack trip. Thank you for those of you who were praying and asking. My good friend Joe, other Joe, not this Joe, other Joe took me out with his dog Otto, and it was just a 7-mile hike in and 7-mile hike out. So we went up, spent the night, stayed a day and hung out, and then came back. And what he didn't tell me was the last quarter mile of this hike is like, if you walked from downtown Paulsbo up to like North Kitsap High School. So there's this trail, so we get around, he never kind of told me, and so as we walked along, we're walking, and I'm obviously I'm in the best shape of my life, and we're going along, and we get about, towards the end, we have about a mile left, and I kept trying to be real nonchalant as I'm gasping. So how much longer do we have on this? And he's like, oh, yeah, I was there. And, but he was super patient and very kind, and we get to this place, and he goes, look at that, and there's this beautiful, the Dosi Wallops River waterfall coming down. And it's like, oh my goodness, that is fantastic. And he goes, now, you see that spot right up at the top of that mountain? I'm like, yeah. And he's like, that is a beautiful view. It is amazing. I'm like, I bet. And he goes, that's kind of where the trail goes, and then it's all downhill from there into the campsite. And I'm like, that's not true. He's like, no, really, that's the end of the trail. And so I literally was doing 10 steps at a time and then stopping. and got out my defibrillator, and fortunately I brought that clear. And but we made it up. Actually, it wasn't that bad. We had a great time, and I love doing it. So thank you for your prayers. I really did. Actually, I heard Mike Lupino's voice in my head as he told me before I left, "Don't have a heart attack." And I thought, that is wise words. And so I said, I'm going to be no shame. If I get to a part where I feel like I'm beginning to have, shortness of breath and left arm ache, and I didn't get that far, but I stopped and took it easy, and Joe was patient and kind, and so was Otto, and we had a great time. One of the things I want to talk about, I want to reinforce this with you every week, and I do it to me. This is the filter I'm trying to do as I work on speaking, as we work on worship, as we work on whether, looking for an office space or looking on if we want to start a new program, anything, are these things, the simple church, this idea of simple church. What does Restore mean by simple church? It means we aspire, and I think we're good at this. This group, as I'm saying this, I'm speaking to the choir a little bit, but I want to remind us of this. And this is all taken from the end of Acts 2. The early church, this is what they said, okay, this is what we know, that Jesus called the apostles, and the apostles then told the people, this is what we're supposed to be doing. We are a church that shares our lives and our stuff with each other and our community. We don't have a lot of outreachy, like proselytizing programs. I firmly 100% believe that sharing is sharing. Sharing is outreach. If you are helping and sharing your life and your stuff and your time and your passions with the people around you, that is what draws people to you and draws people to Christ. That's our brilliant plan. Again, as we go through this assessment, they may go, that's not going to work. I believe it can, because that's how it did in Spirit-empowered, God-empowered early church. Go out and share with people. Share with each other. I love that. That happens naturally. You guys love each other, and that happens all the time. But look for opportunities to share. Be people who share our lives with each other in our community. Second, we're a church that is in awe of God. That's one of the things they had in common. The church started not just because they were great people, but they were actually kind of horrible people who were empowered and fixed by God. And that caused them to be in awe of Him. And they were in awe of God. They had known, the people of Israel knew God for a long time. Little mini sermon here, sorry. They knew God for a long time, but then they met Jesus. And that drove them to another level of awe of God, even more than seeing the miracles in the Old Testament. The more we know Jesus, the more we're going to daily be in awe of who He is and what God can do in our lives. So we're going to be a people who shares our stuff and ourselves with everyone around us, and people who are in awe of God because we're close to Jesus. Now, we can have a worship time like this where those guys sing and it emotionally just powers us. But you know what's even better than that is that it empowers us because we're close to Jesus. And thirdly, we're a group that grows personally and as a community as we love everyone as Jesus did. Jesus gave this new command, this new law, this new way of understanding life that was love everybody. Anytime Jesus talks about the command, follow my commands, obey me, He follows it up with, and what I want you to obey me by doing is by doing what is the most loving thing in that moment to somebody. And we will grow. We will grow in our connection with God. We will grow personally, emotionally, spiritually. And then I think our community will grow by people. And once we get through August, we'll see. But I think we've already seen that. There's some energy. And I think that as people are drawn to us sharing, as they are drawn to Jesus, again, and I say this every week, and this is probably not great salesmanship, but we want people to be drawn to the kingdom of God. We want people to be drawn to the family of Jesus. And I love this little group, and I want this to be a little bit bigger group. I think that this group has something unique to offer this community. However, if someone goes to another family of faith, another place where they're knowing Jesus, another church, and they're being fed, and they're connected, and they're sharing, and they're in awe of God, that's a win. Now, I like people around. I think this is a great group, but I just want you to be aware of that. So that's Simple Church. So if I were to ask you, let's say there was a survey that said, what is the mission of this church? For instance, that were to come out, we would say three things, right? We share, we're in awe of God, and we are a church that grows. And if you forget, you can always look at Acts 2. So we've wrapped up this Growing Your Soul series, this plant series, and I had a lot of fun with it. That was pretty cool. How many of you still have your plants that are still growing? That is crazy. I love that. and getting out in the dirt and maybe giving you a little more thought as you're out in your gardens. But we couldn't do that forever. As much as you gardeners are like actually kind of intense about, are you sure you can't go a little bit more about the garden? Like, that's weird. You guys are scaring me a little bit. So we're going to move on to another hobby, not a real hobby, but the new series is Lunch with Jesus. Lunch with Jesus. We're going to talk about 5 weeks, 5 times that Jesus ate with friends. As I was getting ready for this trip, my friend Joe said, I'll take care of dinners. We're talking about what gear to bring, and he says, let's keep the gear to a minimum. I actually slept in a hammock the whole time this trip, which was awesome, actually. I loved it, and I had a little mosquito netting, which was even more awesome because I laid there and watched them try and get to me. It's nothing like spite against a mosquito. But it was fantastic. But he said, I'll bring dinner. He goes, I'll take care of it. And he dehydrates his own meals. He's one of those kind of people. And he's like, oh, yeah, it's really simple. You make this and you put it in the dehydrator for a few days. And I'm like, yeah, I'm never doing that. So I'm going to go buy it. But it was fantastic. We had curry one night and we had some kind of Mexican meal. I don't know what it was, but it was really good, especially when you're out in the woods and kind of starving. Anything is good. Mo, what is this, gruel? Good, I'll have some extra gruel. He goes, I'll take care of dinner. And he goes, I don't usually eat breakfast or lunch on the trail. I was like, again, what? He's like, no, I don't really feel like eating, so I'll bring dinner. He's like, if you want, you can do that. So I brought, and I'm like, not eat lunch? What kind of communist thing is that? That's so weird. So I brought some Gorp. Remember Gorp from the 70s? Good old raisins and peanuts? I brought some Gorp and some protein bar things that tasted like tar. And don't ask me how I know what tar tastes like. And then the old-fashioned granola bars, the old crinkly ones that when you open, they just all over the ground. I brought those, so the squirrels loved that. But he literally didn't. And I found out why, because at the end of that hike, I actually didn't feel like eating much either. I drank a lot of water, and I didn't really eat lunch or breakfast. I mean, we had a little granola bar at the breakfast, and I had a half a protein bar, and then this amazing dinner. But there's something cool about getting lunch. It's one of my favorite sentences. Hey, let's get lunch. You tell me, hey, let's go get lunch or breakfast or dinner, whatever it is. There's something I love when someone offers that, this idea of going and sharing a meal. And we keep talking about that sharing. That's what comes out of that passage, that the early church, that's kind of what they were known for, is going around and having little potlucks at people's houses. Hospitality, not hospitality like put out the doilies, hospitality like inviting people into your life. You share a meal with somebody, you're sharing life. That's why a date, right? When you're dating, you go have dinner. So you can really evaluate somebody while they're shoving a man-sized bite of roll in their mouth, right? That's how you can really get to know somebody. I love it. It's a great way to catch up, a great way to introduce, a great way to become a part. It's weird that it's intimate yet casual. It's friendly and relational and personal and human and something we all have in common. We got to eat. And it was a way Jesus used all the time to show his humanity and his deity. He had these meals just like a person. He ate food with people while they ate food. And then he talked about how he was God. So we're going to talk about some of those options. This is kind of our theme verse that Peter read. I loved this. Luke 7:34 and 35, this idea that people were going, they kind of bashed on Jesus for this. This is our theme verse for this series. The Son of Man, on the other hand, feasts and drinks, and you say, he's a glutton and a drunkard and a friend of tax collectors and other sinners. But wisdom is shown to be right by the lives of those who follow it. The point was, they had just been talking about how the prophets, how they were kind of bagging on John the Baptist, who ate, kind of was out there and didn't really eat normal food, and they were saying, oh, he's fasting just to show his religious credentials. And Jesus is like, yeah, you bash him for not eating, and then you bash me for eating. Which is it? And I love how he was kind of like, yeah, you're meaning it as an insult, but I love it. I eat meals with sinners and tax collectors. So that's kind of our theme. So today we're going to talk about the feeding of the 5,000. Most of the passages we're talking about today are from Luke 9 and in John 6, but all 4 Gospels share this miracle. All 4, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, all of them talk about this because a couple of things, I think. One is it's so crazy. It's such a weird miracle. And second of all, it was so memorable. So amazing. There's this miracle that Jesus does just locked itself. It became this pivot point, this moment that they all realized, oh my goodness, there is something special here. So here's the story. So those people are following, they're listening to Jesus, and he's pretty cool, he's pretty interesting, and there's something about him, plus miracles. Plus he does these things, like this blind guy's now seeing, and this crippled guy's walking, and he took water and made it into wine, and just this weird stuff. So they're following him around, and they kind of like what he's saying, and they're not sure who he is, but he's attractive to them, and so they follow him, and they watch, and they listen, and they're caring, and this huge group gets bigger, and he finally is teaching. They show up kind of out of town in this big grass field. It says it was nice and grassy, and he's teaching, and there's this large crowd gathered there, and it starts getting late. And it's a bunch of out-of-towners. There's a bunch of tourists. There's no town around, and they don't live near there. They're people who kind of come from a ways away, and there's no place near to get food. And Jesus turns to Philip. I love this. Jesus turns and goes like, so, hey, Philip. Imagine being Philip on this one. He goes, hey, Philip, yeah, there's about 5,000 people here. Where are they going to get some lunch? Where are they going to get food? And Philip is probably like me. He's got a program and a plan, and maybe has a little anxiety, and he's a planner, and he's like, I don't know. It would cost about 8 months' salary to feed all these people. And so they come up with a little plan. Philip's a planner, and Philip says, we just need to send them away. You just need to go say, God, go get food, because we can't I can't figure this out. It's too much money for me to figure out how to feed. So Jesus, you need to send them away. And Jesus, he's like, so you do that. And Jesus says, no, we're going to feed him. And they're like, how? And he says, you do it. Have you ever had somebody say that? You have a brilliant idea, something really cool, or you have a big problem and you bring it to your boss and they go, yeah, you take care of it. You're like, no, that wasn't the plan. See, here was the thing. I'm more of a consultant, right? I want to come in and tell you where you've failed to get people lunch, and then you figure out how to get it lunch. And he goes, no. It says little parentheses in the Gospels. And again, the Gospels are written by the apostles, the first-hand account. And they're like, Jesus, by the way, knew what he was going to do. He knew the plan. He wasn't really putting it all on Philip. And so, in fact, I can imagine Philip going, hey, just remember just a chapter ago, Jesus, you sent us out. We don't have eight months' wages to feed or a big train of food. You just sent us out to go share the gospel. And you said, don't even take an extra coat. That stuff will just be provided for us. Do you remember that? I don't have food for all these people, and I don't have the cash, the drachma, or whatever it is that I'm supposed to have here for all these people. And then Andrew comes up and says, yeah, all I got, I scrounged, because again, we're trying to fix the world for Jesus. All I've got is this, kids, we got one lunch. We got a couple of little barley loaves. Barley loaves. I don't know if you've ever had a good barley loaf. I've never had one. I've never had a bad barley. Have I ever had a barley loaf, Deb? Okay. You've never made a barley loaf, I'm assuming. No, okay, thanks. Not that I know of. I accidentally made a barley loaf. A little barley loaf and some dried fish. And that's all I got. I love this. I don't know if you ever were in Sunday school as a kid, but my Sunday school teachers, which were all either grandmas or moms, really emphasized how smart that kid's mom was to send him with a lunch. That was like the main point of the flannel graph when I was growing up. Like, all the other moms were losers. But Doris sent, I don't know who's Doris, the last living Doris. Doris sent fish and bread with her kid. And Jesus, I love this. He's going, that's all we got. And Jesus goes, yeah, that'll do. That's enough. And he has the 12. He kind of gets them, and he kind of organizes. And Jesus is like, okay, here's what I want you to do. You 12 guys, you're going to go out to all these other people who call themselves disciples. You're going to go out and you're going to tell them to get in groups of about 50. And it's nice, good, grassy ground. They can sit down. And then you're going to do that. And they're like, okay, I'm going to do it. And Jesus, in front of them, thanks God for it and starts breaking up chunks of it and giving it to the disciples. And the 12 start going out and taking it to the groups of 50 and coming back, and there's more. Imagine being those guys. You know, all that was there was a pathetic barley loaf and some weird dried up fish. And Jesus starts handing out more. Like, I've always wondered about, like, what did that physically look like? Like, did the loaf just keep regenerating? Or did he like turn around and come out like, I don't know. And they go and they're giving it to everybody, and that's a work. I mean, that's 5,000 people. Have you ever served in catering? Have you ever done food service? If the bus shows up with 5,000 people, you're done. Like, you just leave your uniform and walk out, put the hairnet on the counter and leave. That's a big chunk of people to serve. That takes a while. That's some effort. Henry's working at Mora Ice Cream. If a bus of 5,000 shows up, do you just walk out and quit? Yeah, that's what I thought. So there's 5,000 people, groups of 50, and they're going out and they're distributing. They go and they're giving food, and it's exhausting, and they're tired. And at the end of it, they come back and everyone's like, oh, I could not have another piece of fish. Thanks. And the barley loaf, a little goes a long way, right? And they come back and they've got 12 portions left. For 12, that's their shift meal, right? The disciples, the apostles, the 12, they all got lunch too. Not only was there enough for 5,000 people, but they got cared for as well. And then the story goes on. I'm going to go beyond a little bit. This is still the introduction. You guys are terrified right now. You're thinking, I want lunch. I have some barley loaves waiting in the crock pot at home. Then Jesus is like, I need a rest. And they sends the apostles, the 12, into a boat across the lake. And the storm comes, remember that? And Jesus comes walking across the water. This is one of my favorite. And Peter's like, ah! Right? There's that whole thing. And then the people are like, we want more. That was weird. Like, so we don't know. They kind of got on that food came from nowhere. And suddenly they were given a pretty good lunch. And so they track him down. They find him on the other side. And they're like, hey, Jesus, you were just over there. How'd you get over here? I walked across the water. They track him down and they want some more food. And then he preaches some more. They're like, we want lunch again. And Jesus preaches some more, and he talks about him being the bread of life and how you need to eat me and my flesh and my blood, and you need to absorb, and you need to be committed to me 100%. And being with me is like being with God. And the people are like, how about just bread? And you're like, no, I'm bread. I'm the bread. And like, we're not up for that. And it says that most of them leave. All that crowd who just got fed, when they heard the real point, were like, nah, it's too much. The quote is, this is a hard teaching. The eating lunch was easy. The following Jesus, the commitment to Jesus, the submission to his new law, this way of living was too hard. And they kind of dispersed. And Jesus turns to the 12 and goes, you guys take enough too? This is one of those great confessions. They go, where else are we going to go? We know you're the Messiah. We got nothing else. Pretty cool story. I love that story. There's a lot. I'm not going to go into a bunch of detail that we could. I will probably revisit this story again, just so you know. If you hang around this church, there's so much in here. I'm not going to try and give it to you all today. But that idea of there was something that happened. It drew people. It was powerful to sit there and eat lunch together. Their physical need for food was satisfied by Jesus miraculously in that moment. It was a big lunch. So let's talk real quickly. The people. First of all, the people had a need. The crowd had a need. It says in Luke 9:12. Late in the afternoon, the 12 disciples came to him and said, send the crowds away to nearby villages and farms so they can get food and lodging for the night. There's nothing for them to eat here in this remote place. I like that the 12 recognized they needed food. And it says Jesus even recognized that. That they realized that there was actual, physical, tangible needs of the people that were there. All the preaching was great. All the teaching was great. All the miracles were great. But in the end, they realized people got to eat. They have some real needs. And it's in all the four guys. It's because it's universal. A hungry crowd is tough. This is like my second son. So George, Henry's older middle brother. Anyway, George, he has an older brother, George. And George, during his senior year of school, would have Tuesday lunch. And all his friends would show up at our house for lunch. And the first few times, Deb's scrambling a little bit. She's wishing she could break up the barley loaves. And then she started planning on it. Because you have a bunch of people show up who are hungry, you got to scramble to feed them. There's something about that. You want to take care of them. A big crowd who has a genuine need. I think as a church, we want to keep our eyes open and see the hungry people. And I've heard a lot of sermons about this passage and talking about people being hungry spiritually. Yes, absolutely. People are hungry. They're also hungry like in their gut. People need stuff, not just food, but they need all sorts of stuff. Emotional, spiritual, physical. Maybe they need a ride. Maybe they need a babysitter. Maybe they need an ear to listen to them. Maybe they actually need food. And I think we can be observant enough to be people who are willing to help as we can. Just like Jesus and the apostles. The crowd was there because they were kind of willing, they wanted, and we'll see this later, that they wanted to be Jesus adjacent. They kind of had faith-like attitudes. They were curious. They liked his message and the works and the spectacle. They were pretty religious people. They were spiritual people. But in the end, they weren't ready for the real commitment that it took to follow Jesus' command to love the way he wanted them to love and to love him. And a lot of that's because they misunderstood this miracle. It says later in John 6, they eventually saw enough miracles, and after this especially, they're like, man, one of the big problems in the ancient world was just getting food to people, right? There were food riots all the time, and they saw enough miraculous stuff that Jesus did. They wanted to make him either a political or a religious leader. It says in John 6 and verse 14, he says this, and when the people saw him do this miraculous sign, they exclaimed, surely he is the prophet that we've been expecting. When Jesus saw that they were ready to force him into being their king, he slipped away into the hills by himself. They missed the point. They thought, oh, he's finally the prophet that's going to lead the church, right? Their version of the church. Or this is the political leader who's going to lead us out of oppression from Rome. And let's make him that. And he's like, no, right? And he's like, you know what? It's not time. I'm going to slip away. Man, we do that all the time. We find somebody who kind of feeds our need, and we want to make them something they're not. So Jesus says, no, that's not what I want to be. They wanted the gift, not the giver. They liked the lunch, but they weren't sure about actually following Jesus. Or at best, maybe they wanted the giver to be kind of their version of the giver, what they thought he should be, political, religious leader. Hungry people want bread. Have you ever been to, what's the Olive Garden, where they bring out the breadsticks? Or any restaurant that gives you rolls ahead of time? When you're hungry, you want bread. There's no shame in that. It's normal. But we always need to be aware of thanking and being aware of the chef or the cook. So a little application in this, so people, it's okay to want lunch. It's okay to be hungry. But let's keep our eyes open for hungry people. Let's find needs we can meet. This is not a gimmick. This is not a trick. It's just to actually be people who are sensitive to want to help genuine, tangible needs. We've said this for years in this church. We want to add tangible value to our community. Not as a trick to get them into church, not as to trick them into Jesus, not to force them to hear some message or a speech or some evangelical, whatever. No, we just want to take care of people. We want people to go, you know what? Jesus people make our lives better. Tangible value. And the beauty of that, when we do that, we can give God the credit. Why would you guys do that? Because we love Jesus. Jesus told us to love you. You're not very lovable on your own. No, right? We just find ways to help. So secondly, the disciples, the 12, the people had a need. The disciples had a mission. I love this, Luke 9, 13 and 14. But Jesus said, you feed them. But we only have 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. They answered it. Or are you expecting us to go buy enough food for this whole crowd? For there were about 5,000 men there. Love this. Getting snarky. The apostles are getting a little rude. Oh, fine. This is all we got. Oh, what do you expect us to go buy it? With what? Kind of like petulant children. 12 saw the need, and they might have even been a little afraid or just realizing they had no way to do it. It was too much money, too much time, too much effort. It was way beyond them to be able to solve the problem on their own. So when Jesus said, you do it, they had no way of doing it. I think that's what Jesus wanted them to realize. You can't do it by yourself. There's tangible needs all around us. We can't do it all by ourselves. It was way too much of these guys. I like that they did come up with a little their own little plan. It's kind of I'm like, yeah, get rid of them, send them away. They're trying, but their plan was wrong. I remember a few years ago, back when this church was called Cornerstone, and before I was on staff, I was an elder, and we did this thing where we had a potluck after every, you guys remember this? We did potluck after every service. And we had, I forget what we called it, friendship lunch or something like that, and we'd clear out the chairs and put up some tables. And one time, my folks were in town, and they were going to go to lunch. We went to Famous Dave's when Famous Dave's was still open. And so we were at lunch, and their potluck is going on back at church, and I think Pastor Jim was gone somewhere as well. Anyway, I get this call at lunch, and they're like, nobody brought any food for the potluck lunch. We have one bag of chips. And I said, well, give thanks and break them apart. No, I said, buy pizza. Oh, okay. So they went and bought pizza, and everyone had enough. But sometimes our own plan, they didn't have that option. They didn't have Uber Eats or Domino's to take care of that. They needed a better plan than they had, which was sending people away, or the one that we came up with in our modern society that we can get on the phone and do it. But they had something better. They had access to someone with the resources and the power to take care of it. They went to the right place. They went to Jesus. And I love that Jesus gave them significant work in this crisis. They had an important job. He let them be a huge part of fulfilling his mission. Jesus' mission at that point was to give people lunch, and they got to be the part that served it. Can you imagine being a hungry person? I'm sure the people began to realize, like, oh no, we're hungry. We don't have food. And all of a sudden, an apostle, Andrew comes up and is like, well, here's some food. They got to be not only a part of the solution, but they probably got a little bit of the joy of seeing people satisfied. That's the church. We get that opportunity. It should light us up every single day. That the mission of God, who could do it on his own, and he's the power, and he's the resource, and he's got all we need, we get to be a part of that. We get to see the joy on someone's face when not only their tangible needs are met, but as their spiritual needs are met. And what a cool thing. If you've ever had an opportunity to do that, you will be addicted to it. It is joyful. And then they did what Jesus said. They followed his command. They said, like, here's the fish and the loaves. He's like, get them all sit down. They're going to eat. And they're like, well, with that, how's that going to work? They had no idea what was coming. But I love that they obeyed. When Jesus says, so here's the new command. You've had all these rules all these years of how to live your life, how to be close to God, how to figure out how to live life. You've had all these rules for hundreds of years. Now here's the new one. Just get out there and love each other. We still kind of balk at that. That seems like fish and loaves. It can't be right. That can't be the new command. That can't be how we're supposed to do it. But what about wearing a thing on my head? And what about when I can do work on a Sunday? Or how does that? No. Love God. Love people. That's the new command. And they obeyed. So what's our mission? Share, grow. Yeah, it's to make disciples. That's the whole point. It seems too much beyond us. It is too far beyond us. We don't have the resources. We don't have the smarts. We don't have the time. We don't have the strength. But we have access to the one who does. That's got to give us some hope. Let's offer everything we've got, whatever little loaves and fish we've got, let's offer it to Jesus and then do exactly what he says and see what he does with it. Maybe it's stuff, maybe it's time, maybe it's personality, whatever. We don't know what, in that moment, a kind word, or maybe a few bucks, or getting coffee with somebody, or spending time, or even, like I said, babysitting, or giving a ride. We don't know in those moments that what tangible need, or what spiritual need we can meet when we just are willing to, God, I'm going to do, here's the little bit I have to offer, I'm going to follow your command, and I'm going to do it. And we obey Jesus' law of love. So the crowd had a need, the disciples had a mission, and then Jesus had a plan. Luke 9:16 and 17. Jesus took the 5 loaves and 2 fishes and looked up to heaven and blessed them. Then breaking the loaves into pieces, he kept giving the bread and the fish to the disciples so they could distribute it to the people. And they all ate as much as they wanted. And afterwards, the disciples picked up 12 baskets of leftovers. He knew. Jesus knew what was going to happen. He knew the plan. And he wanted to show them that when they looked at him, they looked at the Father and what was possible. It even says he was going to stretch the faith of those disciples. He was going to test them, see if they'd really do it. And he was also, because he's human, because he was all man and all God, I bet you he was pretty excited to see how crazy, blown away they were going to be. They're going to love this one. It's one thing to see somebody else who was blind made to see. This is one everyone gets to experience. Eating together at that moment, that big lunch bonded them and revealed his true self. When we have lunch with somebody, it bonds us and we have a chance to reveal our true selves and our commitment to God. The real plan, though, here was to eat the bread of life. In John 6, he says this, John 6, 26 and 29. Jesus replied, I tell you the truth, I want you to be with me not because I fed you, not because you understand the miraculous signs, but don't be so concerned about perishable things like food. Spend your energy on the eternal life that the Son of Man can give you. For God, the Father, has given me the seal of his approval. They replied, we want to perform God's works too, but what should we do? Well, yeah, that sounds good. We want to do it. Jesus told them, this is the only work God wants from you. Believe in the one he has sent. Hey, we want to do good works. We want to be part of your mission. Tell us what to do. This is it. Believe on me. And what are we supposed to believe about him? What did he say to do? Love God. Love people. A couple of things and then we're done. This is super important though, so hang with me. Tangible help needs to be explained with truth, with love, and empowered by Jesus. When we go out to actually feed, when we go out to help, we need to explain what that's about. We're called to do both all the time. Some people say we should not make people uncomfortable by sharing Jesus. We should only help and advocate. And I get that thought that we don't want it to seem gimmicky. We don't want to use our good works as a trick. Some people also say that we should never focus on tangible help or justice or advocacy because it siphons off energy from the gospel. Both are the gospel. Helping people and sharing the truth are the gospel. We do them together. Jesus fed the people, even if it was their own dumb fault for not bringing enough food. And then he told them a tough truth so that they would love him and they would love God and they would love each other. This is the only work God wants from you. Believe in the one he has sent. The crowd just wanted regular bread. They wanted free miracle bread. But Jesus had more to offer. Real, daily, life-giving empowerment. Eating a big lunch with Jesus is the whole enchilada. It's the whole point. It's casual, it's inviting, it's welcoming, and it's intimate. And in all our willingness to love each other and be loved as he commands it is this moment of remembering that he gives us everything we need. John 6:30 says this, and they answered, show us a miraculous sign if you want us to believe in you. Can you believe this? After they just all got full, he says, show us a miraculous sign if you want us to believe in you. What can you do? After all, our ancestors ate manna while they journeyed in the wilderness. Sir, they said, give us bread every day. And Jesus replied, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never be hungry again. Whoever believes in me will never be thirsty. We're going to pray and then we're going to sing one more song. And then we'll be dismissed. As today we remember that he is the bread of life. Let's pray. God, we thank you so much that our tangible needs are met by you, that you love us, that you care for us, that you provide for us. God, we thank you so much that we get an opportunity to be a part of that we can take care of other people's tangible needs. We can also be part of sharing the good news of the gospel, the good news of the truth, that we are to follow you, that you and the Father are one, and that we can love him. God, thank you that you've cared for us. Thank you for making us part of your church and part of your mission, and help us to do right by that. And God, when we are struggling, when we don't know, help us just to remember to love each other and to love you. God, we thank you, and in Jesus' name, amen. John 6:35, Jesus replied, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never be hungry again, Whoever believes in me will never be thirsty. May we be people who realize we're hungry for the truly satisfying Jesus, and then work daily at our mission to bring him to others who are hungry. Have a great week, and we will see you next Sunday.